Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week we return to Venice for a brief episode about the coral and the lace. In this next little fragment of The Dogeresses of Venice by Edgecombe Stanley, we're given the origin of Venetian lace weaving. There's an idea I've had in earlier writing for the podcast, although not so much for the formal line, that the representation of a thing grants a weak material bonus related to the same thing. So if a herb, for example, has a +6 material bonus for healing, then a painting of that herb has +2. Basically, to me, this explains why the decorative arts are so important in the creation of magic items. Following that line of thinking, according to the following folklore, Venetian lace is a representation of coral, and as such, it offers +3 versus demons. As a piece of clothing, it has Move Self 2, Protect Self 4, and Transform Self 4. Also, as this myth points out, lace making and net making are the same craft. So if lace is, for all practical purposes, a type of decorative net, it gains the bonuses for nets, Immobilization 5. If you're having trouble making the connection between nets and lace making, I'd ask you to consider the intermediate historical forms, such as fillet lace, which is lace woven onto a decorative net of squares or diamond shapes, and reticella, which was originally made by pulling thread out of fabric, but eventually developed into a way of making decorative netting. Its name literally means little net. The ancestor of modern lace making, punto a groppo, is still practiced today, although it's known by the French version of its Turkish name, macrame. So over to Edgecombe Stanley. Upon the smiling little islet of San Giorgio in Alga, midway between the Punta di Santa Maria, the westernmost limit of Venice proper, and Fusina, the principal port of the Laguna Morta, there lived once upon a time a good-looking young fisherman, Gian Zorzio della Laguna, so named after his patron saint, St. George of Cappadocia, as skilful in his calling as he was comely in his person. Zorzio had wooed and won the prettiest girl in all Rialto, as hard-working as himself and as good to look upon. One day Bella offered her lover an extraordinarily fine fishing net, which she had, unknown to him, knotted with her own fair hands, and Zorzio, delighted with the gift, tossing it over his shoulder, went off to dedicate it to his saintly patron in the island sanctuary. Kissed on both cheeks, coloured with the ripest peach bloom, her golden hair coiled neatly around her shapely head, save for one rebellious love knot upon her brow, the beauteous innamorata waved loving farewells to her Zorzio as he sculled off in his light barca to make trial of his treasure. With a daring cast, the spider-web-like mesh sank beneath the gentle ripples of the lambent water, and the young fellow, confident of a worthy haul, presently began to pull in his net. "Perbaccio," he cried, for something eerie had caught itself in the all but invisible strands of Bella's handiwork. A piece of petrified seaweed, very delicate in form, very beautiful in colour, very exquisite in texture, verily a scudding flake of opalescent sea foam, transformed by the mermaids of the deep into a lovely coral lace, yielded itself to his ready hand. Zorzio had never beheld such a perfectly beautiful object, and in a transport of delight he hailed his prize as the pledge of his success in life. Speeding homewards in the evening, he made Bella the sharer of his good fortune, and she locked up the bit of coral lace safely in the simple home they had, prepared against the next festival of the brides. Alas, the even tenor of their lives was rudely shattered by a call to arms, and brave Zorzio was enrolled among seamen drafted for service in the Orient. Broken-hearted Bella surveyed his empty seat, and her tears fell fast. Should she ever see her Zorzio again, she wondered, and whispered. Looking up at last, her eyes fell upon her lover's gift, the lovely spray of coral seaweed. An inspiration seized her mind, and with alacrity she reached down her lace pillow, and guided by an unseen power she crossed and crossed her bobbins of fine thread, until she had completed, in interlacing arabesques, a similitude of her treasured model. Thus was invented the far-famed and precious Merletto a Piombini, the point lace of Venice. It is a charming story, and it has a striking moral. That piece of coral seaweed was the mascot, of the Venetian Renaissance. We'll leave Staley there. One problem with this story is that bobbin lace became popular in the 16th century. We can push it back in history for game purposes. Venice's most famous lace isn't bobbin lace, it's a sort of needle lace made on the island of Burano. There is one form of lace which magicians could develop faster than mundanes. Punto et aria was the first lace designed to be stitched without a substrate of fabric, hence its name, which means stitched in the air. A magician could make the substrate using creo magic, so that it simply vanished once the piece was complete. Bobbin lace was made in period all over the place, but it's particularly centred on the island of Palestrina. It's again a bit ahistorical for Ars Magica, but it adds to the desired themes of women's magical craft. Larger pieces of bobbin lace are made by women working in groups, each doing a particular sub-skill in which they have the greatest talent. This seems an excuse to get the coven together and weave spells. Bobbins are made from bone or lead generally because they need to be of identical weight. That being said, mostly ornamental bobbins have been made from glass, precious stones, and whalebone, although I'm not sure of that last one for Italian lace. Different weight materials might make spellcasting easier, and a set of weights might make an unusual talisman. Your saga may vary. Oh, just to explain, I'm doing such a brief episode this week to catch up on the written versions of Games from Folktales, which will be coming out quarterly this year rather than monthly, and to look into the editing of the Cornwall Gazetta. Man from Outer Space on the Ars Magic forum is giving it a final polish.